My son called me tonight. I'm getting married. Tomorrow, your car and house are sold. They were laughing when the notary handed over the last page. Travis adjusted his tie and said, "It's done. Let's move the furniture this weekend." His bride clutched the keys like a prize, never once looking at me. I stood by the kitchen doorway, the same place I used to pour his lunch into a brown paper bag. They thought I didn't understand the paperwork. They thought I was too old to notice the date they changed on the deed. What they didn't know was that 2 weeks ago, I walked into Elliot Green's office with my own copy. What they didn't see was that the co-title remained in my name. And what they will soon learn is that I never sign anything I haven't read 3 times, alone, in the quiet. Now I sit where Charles and I planted the dogwood tree. The wind carries the last leaves down the steps. The kitchen light inside still flickers on a timer. He once said, "Protect what matters, even when no one believes you still can." And tonight, I finally understand why silence is not the same as surrender. "Mom, I'm getting married tomorrow. Oh, and the house and your car? We sold them. Great deal." The water in the kettle had just begun to tremble when the phone rang. It was late, later than most people cared to call, the kind of hour reserved for emergencies or regrets. I reached for the receiver with a small sigh, wrapping my shawl tighter around my shoulders. My fingers felt stiffer than usual. "Hello? Mama? Hey." It was Travis, my son. His voice clipped, as if in a rush, but trying to sound casual. I wanted to tell you something." My eyes flicked toward the old clock on the mantel. 10:47 p.m. "You're all right?" I asked. Yeah, I'm great, actually. Big news. I'm getting married tomorrow." The silence that followed was sharp, not disbelief, just the sound of something old shifting deep inside me. "Tomorrow?" "Yeah, it just came together fast. Small ceremony, nothing big. Mostly friends. You know how things go." He was still talking, but I couldn't hear. The steam from the kettle hissed like it was angry. I turned off the stove, walked over to the sink, and let the quiet press against my ribs. "And, also, don't worry about the car and house. We've handled it. Sold them this week. Great market right now. Figured it was time." I stood still. "I'm sorry. What do you mean?" "Well," he chuckled like it was a sitcom. "I mean, it was just sitting there, Mom. The house. And the car's old. The buyer's giving a good offer. It's all set. Just sign the final papers when they arrive. Cool?" I didn't speak. Not yet. "You're not mad, are you?" he asked Ed. "This is gonna help us start fresh, me and Brenna." "No room for me?" He hesitated. I could hear traffic in the background. He was calling from his car, probably parked somewhere with a good signal, maybe outside a restaurant, maybe with her. "It's not like that, Mom. You know we love you. We needed to move quickly. I'll come by next week, okay? We'll talk then." I murmured something I don't even recall, then set the phone down gently in its cradle. The room felt suddenly bigger, quieter. Even the wind outside had stopped scratching the windows. I walked to the kitchen table and sat. My tea had gone cold. I looked around the room. The same room where I had once set up Travis's 5th birthday train set. Same oak table, same checkered curtains. I reached over and folded the dish towel with deliberate care. A moment later, I rose and climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. The wood creaked beneath me, familiar as breath. I pulled down the old trunk from the corner, its brass latches stubborn from age. Inside, beneath a layer of old holiday cards and yellowed church bulletins, lay a file folder. The label read, "Vaughn Property Documents." I haven't opened it yet. I just sat there on the attic floor, holding the folder against my lap like it might keep me warm. From below, I heard Kenzie shuffling to the bathroom, the creak of her door. She hadn't heard the call. That was good. She was still just a girl. But tomorrow, she might be the only one left who called this place home. By morning, the frost had crept in across the windows like lace. I stood at the kitchen sink with my fingers curled around a chipped mug, steam from the fresh coffee fogging my glasses. Kenzie came out of her room, hair tousled, still wearing her sweatshirt with the faded university logo. She always looked like she belonged to a different decade, maybe 1998. "You're up early," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Habit," I replied. "Can't sleep past 6 anymore. The sun doesn't rise, but my knees do." She smiled, opened the fridge, and took out the last apple. "Want half?" "No, baby. You eat." She leaned against the counter, watching me quietly. "Was that the phone I heard late last night?" I hesitated. "Just the wrong number." She nodded like she didn't quite believe me. She never pushed. I both appreciated and resented that. After she left for school, I sat down at the dining table with the folder from the attic. I opened it slowly. Title deeds, co-ownership statements, tax documents, all with my name printed neatly beside Charles's. Travis had been just 16 when his father passed. I remember the day we added me as sole co-owner. I remember the handshake. I remember the notary's name, Mrs. Haywood, who smelled like lemon balm and always wore navy heels, even in the snow. I reached for my old tablet, the one I barely used except to check church newsletters. I opened the email icon. The inbox was a mess, but something caught my eye. A subject line: Final title transfer, Vaughn Estate. Dated last week. I opened it. The PDF attached showed a sale, a completed transaction, signatures, mine included. Only, it wasn't mine. The signature was close, slanted just like mine, but the V in Vaughn hooked too high, and the D in Mildra was too loopy. Charles once told me, "Your handwriting's got structure. Looks like it knows where it's going." This looked like someone was guessing. The buyer's name was unfamiliar. A real estate group in St. Louis. My heart didn't race. It rarely did anymore. But I felt something like a shift in air pressure, like standing in a room where someone's just left without closing the door. I printed the email and tucked it into the folder. That evening, I sat in the living room and picked up my knitting needles. Faye had taught me to knit 30 years ago. I was never good, but the repetition calmed me. Loop, pull, turn, loop, pull, turn. The scarf I was working on had no real recipient. Maybe I'd leave it on the church's Christmas donation table next month. The house felt larger now, or maybe I felt smaller. Even the ticking clock on the mantel seemed louder. I imagined Travis, laughing with Brenna, sharing appetizers at their rehearsal dinner, wondering if they'd toast to the fresh start the house money had bought them. He hadn't once asked where I'd go. At 8:15, I opened the drawer in the hallway sideboard and pulled out an old dog-eared business card. Elliot R. Green. Real estate law. Discretion. Advocacy. Legacy. I'd met him once, years ago, at a church legal seminar. He told the room full of widows and retirees, "Never give up the title to what your hands have built, not even to your children, especially not to your children." I ran my fingers along the embossed edges. Then I picked up the phone. One ring. Elliot Green speaking. I introduced myself. He remembered. I told him what had happened, reciting details slowly, clearly. He asked for copies. I told him I had them. He told me to scan and email. I said I'd drop them off in person if that suited him better. He chuckled and said, "Miss Vaughn, you haven't changed." "No," I replied, "but my son has." Later that night, I made tea again. Kenzie sat beside me, working on a school assignment. She looked up once and asked if I'd like her to braid my hair the way Mama used to do on Sundays. I said yes. And as her fingers worked gently through the strands, I looked across the room at the framed picture of Charles and me, taken the summer Travis turned 10. We stood in front of this same house, our house, paint still fresh, garden full, the future untouched. Now the paint was chipped, the garden was empty, but I was still here. Mildred looks at her reflection in the hallway mirror and murmurs, "I suppose. It's time." Sometimes the only place you're allowed to live is in the memory of what used to be yours. The wind outside had softened by morning, but the cold stayed behind like an unpaid bill. I slipped my boots on slowly, careful not to wake Kenzie. The air in the hallway carried that faint scent of cinnamon she always wore. Subtle, not like the strong florals older women tend to choose. She never used too much of anything. Not sugar, not perfume, not words. The porch steps groaned beneath my weight as I stepped down, the wooden railing cold under my palm. My breath came out in slow puffs. I reached the edge of the driveway and stopped. It was empty. I stared at the gravel for a long time. The space where my Ford used to sit looked oddly naked, like a part of the yard had been shaved. My car, the same one I had driven Travis to campus in, that long, quiet road down Highway 79. He sat in the passenger seat back then, earbuds in, but one hand still resting on the dash like a boy trying to stay grounded. I didn't touch my phone, didn't check for a message. I turned and made my way down the street instead. The fog hung low, draping Maplewood Hollow in a gray stillness that made the world seem muffled. Each step crunched leaves beneath my boots, pecan shells from the trees lining the street, broken and ground into the sidewalk by passing shoes and wind. At the corner, Penny and Joe's glowed warm against the frost. The diner had been there since before Travis was born. I pushed the door open, the small bell above it ringing with its usual sleepy chime. "Morning, Miss Vaughn," called Darla from behind the counter, already pouring my coffee into the blue-rimmed mug she reserved for me. "Morning," I replied, slipping into booth 4, the one near the window. It was empty except for one couple in the far corner, young, too loud, too eager to be happy in public. Faye walked in a few minutes later, cheeks flushed under her knit cap. She held up 2 fingers at Darla, who nodded and brought over a plate of toast and jam. Faye settled across from me, pulling off her gloves 1 finger at a time. "You're out early," she said, eyes narrowing at me the way only women in their 80s know how to do. "Needed air," I said. She nodded slowly, then added, "They're saying snow by next week. Real snow this time, not just spit." You look thinner. That's what winter does. Or suns." We sipped in silence for a while, the heater humming behind us. Faye's toast went untouched. She kept looking at me like she wanted to say something deeper, but her eyes stayed on the street outside. "My daughter once asked to borrow my deed," she finally said. "Said it was just for a refinance. 2 years later, I'm paying rent to a company she started. Can't even hang a picture without permission." I looked down at my mug. "I'm sorry." Faye shrugged. "She says she loves me. I believe her. I just don't trust her." I looked up, and for a second, we shared that old, tired understanding that you can raise someone to be decent, but decency has an expiration date when money shows up. Back home, the mailbox creaked as I opened it. Inside, wedged between a grocery circular and a newsletter from church, sat a narrow white envelope, addressed to me, but with no stamp. I opened it slowly, unfolding a set of printed pages that felt too heavy for their weight. transfer of ownership, property reassignment, my name in fine print, Travis's signature below, and a closing statement. Final. The sky had darkened since my walk to the diner. The cold had settled deep in the bones of the house. Inside, I set the envelope down on the kitchen counter next to the radio. The afternoon segment had just started. Memory Lane at 9. A soft trumpet floated through, followed by Ella Fitzgerald's voice, smoother than silk. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. Kenzie got home around 4. I was still in the kitchen, peeling apples for a pie I didn't intend to bake. She dropped her backpack by the door like always, kicked off her boots, and called out a faint. "Hey, I'm home." "In here," I said. She walked in and paused. "You didn't have your car today?" I didn't look up from the apple in my hand. "It's gone." "Gone." I shrugged, sliced another wedge. The peels curled into soft ribbons on the counter. She tilted her head. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, it's not in the driveway. I haven't been since this morning." She didn't speak for a moment, just stood there frowning. Then she crossed the room and opened the fridge, half out of habit, half for distraction. "Need me to walk to the store for anything?" "No." She closed the fridge door slowly. "Okay." I watched her from the corner of my eye. She was chewing the inside of her cheek. That's what she did when something didn't sit right. Later that evening, after she went upstairs, I walked into the pantry. The air smelled faintly of dried oregano and old flour. I reached up to the highest shelf, behind the extra cans of pumpkin puree I'd forgotten we had, and pulled down a metal tin. It was dented in one corner. Charles had used it to store coins. I turned it into my quiet place for everything else. Inside, I found it. A small stack of cards clipped with a rusted paper fastener, doctor appointments, church contacts, the old auto mechanic from Belleville, now long retired. And tucked behind them, a single card with red ink circled around the name. Elliot R. Green, Real Estate Law, Discretion, Advocacy, Legacy. I sat down at the kitchen table and placed the card beside the envelope I'd gotten earlier. My fingers brushed over the embossed print, the circle like a quiet target. Just then, Kenzie came back downstairs. She looked flushed, like she'd been pacing. She had a piece of paper in her hand, creased and slightly smudged. "I found this," she said, "in the recipe binder." It was tucked behind the peach cobbler page. I took it from her. Another printout. Real estate transfer confirmation. This one had the buyer's name, some holding company, and a digital timestamp. She pointed to the bottom of the page. "That signature, that's supposed to be yours?" I nodded once. "You didn't sign it?" "No." "Did you agree to any of this?" I looked at her and, for a moment, saw her mother's eyes. Not the eyes of the girl who had passed too soon, but the girl I once sat up with during long flu nights, reading to her in a rocking chair that creaked louder than the story. "People don't always need permission," I said softly. "Just the assumption they already have it." Kenzie sat down across from me. She was quiet, but her jaw was tight. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" I looked down at the business card again. "No, I'm not." I reached for the phone on the wall. Still the same one we'd had since 1992. Cord slightly frayed at the base, numbers a little faded. I punched in the number slowly, one finger at a time. She watched me, arms folded across her chest. It rang once, then a voice, smooth, steady, and too familiar to be anything but real. "Elliot Green, Real Estate Law. We used to sit here, me, my husband, and Travis, booth number 6. This morning, there was no coffee order with my name on it." The diner looked emptier than usual. Midday sun spilled through the windows but couldn't quite chase off the cold that clung to the floor tiles. There was a small Christmas tree in the corner, half lit, the colored bulbs blinking lazily like they were in no hurry to celebrate anything. I sat at the table by the window, not booth n6. That one was occupied by a couple of contractors talking about roofing estimates and propane costs. I had chosen the table next to it, the one with the view of the post office. A scone sat in front of me, lemon poppy seed, dry around the edges. I hadn't touched it. Darla came by with a new pot of coffee. "No mug today?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "Well, I saved you a slice of pecan pie. On the house." I looked up at her and smiled, soft but steady. "Thank you, Darla, but not today." She nodded and left the plate anyway. The warmth of it settled into the table like an old friend. Across from me, Faye pulled her shawl closer and narrowed her eyes. "You're thinking again. That obvious? You're quieter than usual. And you haven't unwrapped your silverware." She leaned in a little. "I don't suppose this has anything to do with the call you made the other night." I didn't answer right away. My eyes drifted to the edge of the booth where the vinyl seat had cracked. Charles used to fidget there, always adjusting his coat. Travis, on the other side, his elbows on the table, head bowed toward his phone even during grace. "Do you remember last Thanksgiving?" I said. Faye blinked. "Which one?" 2 years ago. Travis insisted on ham, said turkey was dry and boring. She smirked. The boy always did think he knew better. I didn't argue, just made the ham. He barely looked up from his phone the whole meal. The cranberry sauce was the only thing I made that nobody touched. "You always make too much," Faye said, like a reflex. That year, I didn't. We both went quiet. A few plates clinked in the kitchen. Someone at the counter asked for extra whipped cream. "Inheritance without consent," Faye said softly. "Is that what this is?" I raised an eyebrow. She continued. "That's what it is, isn't it? They're not waiting for you to be gone. They're carving you out of the picture while you're still in it." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse and touched the corner of the envelope I'd been carrying all week. Thin, unassuming, but weighty in meaning. My fingers rested on it while I watched the light crawl down the street outside. The town hall had half its windows strung with Christmas lights. The rest sagged, unfinished, just like everything else these days. The door to the diner opened and Kenzie stepped in, cheeks red from the wind. She wore her corduroy jacket and the knit hat I had made for her last fall. She walked straight to our booth, didn't even pause to say hello to Darla. Without a word, she slid a paper across the table. I recognized it before she said a thing. The same document from the envelope, only now it had yellow highlighter marks and ink circles. "This signature," she said, pointing. "This isn't even yours." "No," I said. Faye leaned in. "Then whose is it?" Kenzie answered before I could. "A copied scan, forged from a tax form she signed years ago. They cut and pasted it." Faye sucked in her breath. "I spoke to Elliot Green yesterday," I said, lifting my coffee but not drinking it. "He confirmed what I suspected." "Elliot Green?" Faye blinked. "The estate attorney from Larkspur?" I nodded. "He doesn't advertise. He doesn't have to." Kenzie glanced between us. "You already retained him?" "I did." "You didn't say anything." I smiled gently. I needed to be sure I wasn't just being sentimental. "And now?" Kenzie asked it. "Now," I said. "I'm being precise." Faye stirred her tea absently. "So they tried to erase you on paper." "They underestimated how much paper I've kept," I replied, glancing toward the scone, now cold. "Charles taught me early. Don't trust memory, trust ink." Kenzie leaned forward. "So what's the plan?" I tapped the envelope inside my purse. "I'm not going to storm anything. I'm not calling lawyers to shout. I'm letting the ink speak. Faye exhaled slowly. This isn't just about property, is it? I met her eyes. It's about being asked to vanish politely, about being removed from your own story. She nodded, eyes slightly misty. The waitress passed again and gave me a warm look. Still working on that scone? I smiled. It's keeping me company. I'll box it up if you want. That'd be nice. When she walked off, Kenzie whispered, They think you're folding. Good, I said. That's the shape surprise takes. Outside the diner window, a dog barked as a mailman crossed the street. The post office door creaked, letting out a draft of warm air and the smell of old paper. Across the square, they were testing the town's sound system. The Way We Were began to play, soft, slightly warped from the speaker. Faye chuckled. Now that's a song. It was playing the night Charles proposed, I said. At a dance hall near Elgin. We wore wool coats and drank cider that was too sweet. Kenzie smiled. You never told me that. There's more I've never told, I said. She caught the tone in my voice. You're building something, aren't you? I nodded. A defense. Quiet, but real. Faye looked between us. Do you need help? You're already helping, I said. By sitting here. By knowing. Kenzie took out her phone, opened her notes app. What's next? We gather, I said. We gather every small oversight, every shortcut they took, because they weren't careful. They didn't think they had to be. They assumed you were too old, too tired, too out of touch, Kenzie said bitterly. I smiled gently. They sold it. But the co-title is still in my name. They forgot I know where the ink dries. Faye looked at me with something new in her expression. Not pity, not concern. Respect. You're not angry, she said. No, I replied. I'm clear. Then I said the thing that had been sitting on my tongue all morning. I'm going to the wedding, I told them, but not as a guest. I arrived 15 minutes early. No invitation. No seat. And yet, I saw everything. The wind off the lake stung my cheeks, even through the scarf I'd wrapped twice around my neck. The rented venue stood proud across the street, whitewashed with modern angles, far too polished for the kind of boy Travis had once been, muddy shoes and grape jelly stains. I sat on a wooden bench, cracked from weather and time, but firm under me. A maple tree overhead had lost most of its leaves, leaving only brittle branches to rattle against the cold November sky. Through the glass panels of the building, I could see movement. Guests arrive in layers of satin and wool, their laughter muffled by the wind. Music filtered faintly through the door as it opened and closed. String quartet, no doubt. Travis never liked organs. He appeared just before the hour, dressed in a deep navy tuxedo, tailored and spotless. He smiled for pictures, straightened his cufflinks, kissed Brenna's cheek in full view. Not once did he look across the street. Once upon a time, I'd buttoned those sleeves, pressed those collars, tied his shoes while he kicked his legs impatiently. Now he fastened his own future without a glance behind him. I didn't bring flowers. I didn't bring anger. Only a long gray coat and a leather-bound envelope. In my purse sat everything I had gathered. The notarized documents confirming the forgery, the certified copy of the co-title, the revocation of sale, and the letter I'd written in careful, steady cursive. I waited until the ceremony began, until the clapping quieted and the world forgot to look outside. Then I crossed the street. The receptionist at the back entrance was young, barely 20. She wore a headset and too much perfume, but her eyes were kind. I'm here to drop something off, I said, holding the envelope with both hands. She hesitated. You're not on the list? No, I replied gently. But this is for Travis Vaughn. It's important. It belongs with him today. She looked at me for a moment longer, then slowly reached for the envelope. I'll make sure he gets it. I nodded once. Thank you. I didn't linger. I didn't peek around the corner. I didn't need to. Power doesn't shout. It arrives quietly and stays. I walked down the gravel path that looped around the venue and led to the main road. My heels clicked softly, the only sound now that the music was sealed inside thick glass walls. Behind me, the ceremony would be unfolding, vows being read, rings being exchanged. I didn't need to hear them. I knew how they went. I reached the small bus shelter near the edge of the lake. It was empty, just a plexiglass panel shielding a bench from the wind. I sat down slowly, one hand still on my purse. The leather felt warm beneath my fingers. Inside, my phone buzzed once. I took it out, the screen lighting with a voicemail transcription from Elliot Green. Freeze confirmed. Title in dispute. No disbursement to the buyer until further notice. I stared at those words for a long moment, letting them settle inside me like tea steeping. They thought this was a clean break, a neat sale, a moving on. But nothing built on assumption stays standing for long. The house still wore my name on its bones, in the town registry, on the title deed, in the tax records, in every corner where I'd once wiped baseboards or patched drywall or kissed a fevered forehead goodnight. It was never just a house. A honk sounded down the road, the city bus making its slow approach. I stood and waved gently. When it pulled to the curb, the doors sighed open and I climbed aboard, nodding at the driver. 2 rows back, a man with a thick coat and kind eyes gave me a small smile as I sat near him. Cold one today, he said. It is, I replied. He reached into his pocket and held something out in his palm, a butterscotch candy, wrapped in gold foil. Want one? I hesitated, then nodded. Sure. I took it with a quiet thank you, unwrapped it, and placed it on my tongue. It melted slowly, sweet and warm. Outside the window, the lake shimmered with early frost. Inside the venue, they'd be smiling for pictures, raising glasses, perhaps cutting a cake shaped like the life they believed was already theirs. But I had no intention of stopping them. I only intended to remind them. They planned a future without me. They just forgot the foundation still had my name. This year, I roasted a turkey for 3, and for once, the table felt just right. The bird came out of the oven golden and proud, its skin crackling where rosemary sprigs had kissed it just right. I placed it at the center of the old oak table, the one Charles and I had bought secondhand in 1974, and refinished together during that long summer when money was tight, but time was generous. A fire hummed low in the hearth, no television, no background noise, just the quiet crackle of logs and the faint hum of cranberry sauce setting in the fridge. I used good china, not because anyone insisted, but because today felt like the kind of day that called for ceremony. 4 times I had unwrapped those plates since Charles passed. Once for his memorial, once for Travis's college graduation, once, foolishly, for dinner I thought I would bring everyone back under one roof. And today, he'd have liked that. The polish, the effort, the steadiness of tradition. Kenzie was in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled high, mashing potatoes with the kind of gusto only 17-year-olds can bring to simple tasks. You're using butter, right? I asked from across the room. She grinned. And cream. No half measures today. I smiled and turned back to setting the table. 3 places. No more. No less. Faye arrived 20 minutes late, as expected. She always said arriving early made people nervous. She wore her gray shawl and brought a warm cobbler wrapped in a red checkered towel. You made the crust from scratch? I teased, taking it from her hands. I'm not a criminal, Mildra. We laughed, the kind that comes from having seen too many seasons come and go to waste breath on small lies. When the food was finally laid out, and the gravy had passed every taste test, we sat. Just us. 3 women, 3 chairs, 3 steady hands that had done far more lifting in life than anyone ever noticed. We passed dishes back and forth, clinking silver against porcelain. The stuffing was just right this year. Sage and cornbread, the way my mother used to make it. Faye said grace in that half-serious, half-sarcastic tone of hers that somehow still felt sacred. Then Kenzie pulled a folded piece of paper from her sweater pocket and cleared her throat. "I brought something," she said, "for my early decision application, English Lit track. They asked for a personal essay." We paused with forks in hand. She read aloud. "The strength of quiet women. My grandmother never slammed doors. She never raised her voice at dinner, even when the meatloaf was burnt or the news was bad. She taught me that silence isn't absence, it's armor. Some inherit trauma. Others inherit a spine made of stillness." The room held still, the way only truth can still a room. Faye wiped under her glasses, pretending it was the steam from her cobbler. I didn't pretend anything. I reached across the table and touched Kenzie's hand. "You'll get in," I said. She beamed, cheeks pink from more than the fireplace. Later, after coffee and the first hint of a second slice of pie, I stood and reached into the drawer by the hutch. From it, I pulled a thin folder, leather-bound, with a brass button clasp. I set it beside Kenzie's plate. She looked at me, brows raised. "What's this?" "This house," I said, "now has your name on the deed." Silence again, but this time it stretched warm across the table. Faye leaned back. "You didn't tell me you were giving away real estate today." "I'm not giving it away," I replied. "I'm handing it forward." We sat with that truth a moment longer. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't flinch. Neither did Faye. Kenzie looked at me. "Expecting someone?" "No." I rose and crossed to the door, opening it slowly. There he stood. No tuxedo, no wife at his side, no flowers, no gifts. Just Travis, my son, alone, his shoulders hunched slightly, jacket loose around his frame. He looked older than last week. Or maybe I just hadn't looked long enough then. His eyes scanned behind me, taking in the fireplace, the smell of roasted turkey, the voices of women sharing pie and secrets. "You cooked," he said. I looked him square in the eye. "I always do," I replied. "You ask me why I changed. I didn't. I just stopped pretending I hadn't already." The fire had died to a low amber hum, soft crackling beneath the whisper of wind tapping the window panes. My hands wrapped around the chipped mug, chamomile steam curling up toward my cheek. The old armchair gave under me in all the familiar ways, creaking like it had bones of its own. Across from me, Travis sat hunched on the edge of the sofa. He hadn't taken off his jacket. His knees kept bouncing like a man waiting for the ground to give. I didn't say anything, just looked at him over the rim of my mug. The scrapbook on my lap rested open to a page with an old Polaroid. Travis in 3rd grade, toothless grin, holding a trophy for Most Improved Reader. His father had written something on the back. He reads, therefore he becomes. I wondered if Travis remembered that. He cleared his throat. "I don't even know where to start." I waited. I guess I didn't think it'd go that far. "We just thought you'd be okay with it." Still, I didn't speak. He fidgeted, then rubbed a hand down his face. "I mean, I should have called. About the car. About the house. I know that. Brenna thought it was cleaner if we—" I raised one hand slightly. Not a protest, just a pause. You don't owe me a clean story, I said. Only an honest one. He looked up then, eyes glassy. I'm sorry, he said. And for the first time, I believed he meant it, even if he didn't know why yet. I took another sip of tea. He swallowed. Do you forgive me? I let that hang in the air. The fire crackled. A branch snapped somewhere in the stack. From the kitchen came a distant clink of a plate. Kenzie, cleaning quietly, giving us space. I don't carry forgiveness like a prize, I said, setting the mug on the side table. That's not something I hold anymore. You'll have to find it in yourself. I reached beside the chair and handed him a manila envelope. He held it like it might sting. Inside, a copy of the legal reversal, a photocopy of the forged signature, and a single sheet of blank paper. Written in my cursive, across the center, start over. He pulled each sheet out slowly, processing them one at a time. When he reached the blank page, his breath caught. He looked up. You could have ruined me. I could have, I agreed. His hand tightened around the envelope. Then he placed it gently on the coffee table, as if returning something borrowed. What happens now? He asked, and I leaned back into the chair. I set the table for who shows up, that's all. His shoulders fell like a weight had shifted, but not lifted. We sat in silence for a while, the kind only blood and history can make tolerable. Then I stood. I walked him to the door. The hallway light flickered once as we passed beneath it. Same bulb I'd meant to replace last week. His shoes scuffed softly against the hardwood, the way Charles's used to when he didn't want to wake anyone. Funny, the echoes men leave behind. At the front door, Travis hesitated. His fingers wrapped around the knob, but he didn't turn it. He looked back over his shoulder. I'll call next week, he said. I gave him a small smile. That'll be the first. He gave a half laugh, then opened the door. Cold night air pressed in. Outside, a thin frost shimmered over the steps. He took one cautious step onto the porch, then another, paused again. But I didn't say anything more. Some things only grow in silence. I closed the door behind him gently. The latch clicked like punctuation at the end of a sentence I'd spent years too afraid to write. Back in the living room, the fire had almost died completely. A few embers blinked beneath the logs, glowing like coals that had chosen memory over heat. I sat again in my chair and pulled the crocheted blanket from the side. It smelled faintly of cedar and Faye's peach cobbler. As if summoned by thought, Kenzie stepped softly out of the kitchen. Her hair was pulled back with a pencil, the way she did when she was trying to look serious. She had a dish towel in one hand and a question in her eyes. She crossed the room without a word and draped the blanket across my lap. Then she sat on the ottoman in front of me, folding her hands like she was preparing for a confession. Was that hard? She asked, voice barely above the fire's whisper. I looked at her, really looked. The way she sat steady, shoulders squared but gentle. The way she'd watched everything these past months without interrupting, letting truth reveal itself instead of forcing it out. No, I said. It was hard waiting for someone else to do it. Her lips pressed together, not a smile exactly, but something soft. She nodded. Behind her, Faye's scarf still hung on the coat rack by the door. She'd left hours earlier, but said she'd returned Sunday with sweet tea and the knitting she'd promised to finish by Christmas. The scarf swayed gently, caught in a draft, like it too had something left to say. I reached for my scrapbook again. On the next page, a photo of the house in spring, dogwood trees blooming like they always did. Charles had taken it the year before he passed. He'd scribbled on the margin in blue pen, "Home is where you still reach for the light switch in the dark." I closed the book and placed it gently on the coffee table, right beside the manila envelope Travis had left behind. Kenzie stood and leaned over to kiss the top of my head. "I'm going to bed," she whispered. I nodded. She turned toward the hallway, pausing only to turn off the overhead light. I stayed in the armchair a while longer. Outside, the wind carried dried leaves across the porch. The sound was faint, but familiar, like memories brushing up against the present, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to come home. I was already there. Life after the unraveling was quiet, but not empty. I kept the armchair by the fireplace and brewed tea the same way I always had. Some days, I walked down to the diner just to see who still remembered my order. Most did. Faye came by every Sunday with her knitting and her stories that were mostly true. Kenzie stayed through winter break, then again the next summer. She never asked to move in. She just belonged. Travis called once. Then again, we didn't talk about the house. We talked about the weather, then about music. And one day, without planning to, we talked about his father. The lesson? Maybe it's this. People will take from you whatever you let them. Your time, your home, your name. But dignity? That's reclaimed the moment you stop asking who deserves it. I didn't change. I just remembered who I was before I started shrinking to fit. And now I leave the porch light on for whoever comes in kindness. But I keep a spare key only for myself.